Let's now bring in Brian Lee Crowley, Managing Director at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Brian, good evening and thanks for your time.
Good evening. It's great to be with you.
So not too long ago, we recall, Brian, that the U.S. itself negotiated a deal with China to de-escalate their trade war. Canada did the same thing. What do you make of these latest threats by Donald Trump?
Well, I think this is entirely in keeping with Donald Trump's general approach to any kind of negotiation. I'm frankly surprised that people are still surprised by it. The very first thing that he does is he has this unerring sense for weakness and fear. And what he does is he immediately trots out what he thinks the opposing party most fears. I mean, let's face it, we export 50% of everything that's made in the private sector in Canada, and 2/3 of that goes to the United States. There is no other economic relationship that is anywhere near as important to us as the relationship with the United States. And Donald Trump is one of his big priorities, and this is a cross-party priority in Washington, is to tamp down China's growing power and try and rally the Western powers against deeper reliance on China. So he sees Canada. It's not a question of free trade with China. What he sees is the Prime Minister of Canada announcing a trade deal with China, and he says, "Look, if you may have to make a choice, Canada, between China and the United States, and if you choose China, there will be consequences." I think that's the fundamental message that Trump is trying to communicate.
And you know what surprises me, Brian, in all this is the fact that the president is not seeing that he is actually forcing his allies, especially Canada, to make that choice. The manner in which he's been behaving with Canada and all that he's been proposing he wants to do, from making it the 51st state to calling the prime minister as governor, he is forcing that choice upon us to expand and diversify our trade is concerned. Speaking of which, how do you think all of this is going to impact the discussions when it comes to CUSMA?
Yes, look, there is no doubt that Donald Trump, the way that he behaves, is terribly insulting and is designed to evoke emotions in the people on the other side of the table from him. And he is a master at that. What we need to do as Canadians, people who are very deeply invested in a close relationship with the United States, we need not to rise to his bait. When we do, we play his game. What we need to do is every time he says these outrageous things, he calls the prime minister, governor, and he talks about the 51st state, and he talks about 100% tariffs on trade with China. The most positive thing that we can do is to say, "Oh, thank you very much for your comments, Mr. President. Can we get back to the matter at hand now?" Don't let him set the agenda by appealing directly to our emotions to make us a weak negotiating partner. That's exactly what he's doing, and we keep falling into the trap.
Do we, though? Because I ask you that because the Prime Minister, as we know, when he was at Davos, he gave a speech not mentioning Trump, not mentioning, of course, the United States, but he got applause for it, and a lot of leaders came out and said, "Well said, Mark Carney." And then, of course, he had to hit back the way he did about what the President said about how Canada lives because of the U.S. Coming to the point, we know that this is the most important partner we have to deal with, Brian. But moving forward, how do you see then Canada deal with them when this president is so erratic and every now and then has a flip-flop on his own decision?
Well, I look back to the first Trump presidency when our NAFTA agreement came up for renegotiation. And you may recall that Donald Trump said, "Oh, NAFTA, worst trade agreement in the history of the world. We're going to get rid of it. I'm going to rip it up." And, he got everybody quite upset and frightened. But when you actually sat down and negotiated with him, he agreed to a trade agreement which, in its details, was not actually significantly that different from NAFTA. So you have to separate out the negotiating tactics that he uses. He's constantly trying to stick his finger in everybody's eye, trying to frighten us, trying to upset us, trying to make us angry because he thinks that makes us weak negotiating partners. Now, so we need to keep our eye on the ball in terms of our relationship with the United States. But to your point, Of course, we need to diversify our trade relationships as much as we possibly can. That's always an imperative. Why would we not want to sell to as many people as we possibly can?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
But we have to bear in mind that our relationship with the United States is the one indispensable part of the prosperity of Canada from an international point of view.
You bet. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Brian Lee Crowley, appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you for joining us tonight, Brian.
Pleasure.